Tonight, a Target 8 investigation into the death of a black teenager in the St. Joseph River 31 years ago is raising serious questions, not only about the initial detective work that found Eric McGinnis accidentally drowned, but also the recent state attorney general report that determined someone killed him. Here's Target 8 investigator Ken Kolker.
Brand new coastie Saul Brignoni thought it was a mud-covered log floating down the St. Joseph River toward Lake Michigan on May 22, 1991. Eric McGinnis had disappeared 5 days earlier, on May 17th.
It was an early morning. I remember being down at our motor lifeboat. It's a 44-footer.
Then someone called from the company that was dredging the river.
And they told us that there's something that needed to be looked at.
A few minutes later, they were pulling in a body.
His face was swollen, and he was in full rigor. I remember that.
Brignoni, just 19 at the time, lost track of what happened in the decades that followed. He went on to join the California Highway Patrol.
Countless bodies over the years, but Eric McGinnis was the first one, and I'll never forget him.
Eric McGinnis, a sophomore at Benton Harbor High School, a member of Junior ROTC and the NAACP in Benton Harbor, sang in his church's choir.
He was a young man that had a lot of enthusiasm about everything that he felt that was important. He was full of energy, to a fault sometimes.
McGinnis stayed sometimes with his uncle, Benny Bowers, who is now a retired Michigan State Police lieutenant. His uncle last saw him a week before the death.
I put him on the bus in Kalamazoo. He stopped briefly and turned around and said, he said, Uncle Junior, he said, I love you. He never said that before. And that was the last time I seen him. So he was a great kid.
An autopsy ruled the death a drowning and found no signs of injury. McGinnis had a blood alcohol level of 0.04, about half the level considered intoxicated. The recovery launched an investigation that further divided two neighboring cities already separated by culture and race. Benton Harbor is 85% black, with a poverty rate nearing 50%. Just across the river, St. Joe is 86% white, with a poverty rate of less than 9%. Some in Benton Harbor, including McGinnis's family, believe the death was racially motivated. Some accused the St. Joseph Police Department, which was investigating the case, of a cover-up.
They didn't want to release the status of the investigation because they feared for racial pushback or riot to some degree from the Benton Harbor community.
Eric's mom died in 2008, not knowing what happened to her only child.
She died with a broken heart. My mom died with a broken heart. My mom said in 1991 that the whites in St. Joe and the white police department in St. Joe, these are her words, they're not gonna investigate this.
Then last year, 30 years after the death, State Attorney General Dana Nessel assigned 2 special investigators to reopen the case after a witness came forward. How certain are you that it's a homicide? You talking 90%? You talking 100%?
I'm 98% sure that it was a homicide.
The AG investigator says he is certain that a white man named Curtis Pitts, who was 19 back then, was the killer. Pitts died by suicide 12 years later. But he says he does not believe the homicide was racially motivated.
I believe that that thing happened just the way they said, that he was chased down to the river, to the pier. I believe that based on the evidence and the testimony from witnesses that Curtis Pitts kicked him. I believe that Eric went in the water. I believe that Mr. Pitts and 2 other individuals went in the river to get him out.
As in an attempt to save him?
As an attempt to save him. I believe that happened. I don't think that they wanted it to happen that way. When I say they, Mr. Pitts and the party that was with him, I don't think that they wanted it to happen that way, only because they went in to go get him.
The AG investigator is a retired Detroit police detective who investigated homicides for 6 years. He told Target 8 he was surprised by what local police did not do back then. Alibi witnesses not questioned, tips not followed, but he blamed it on a lack of experience.
Yeah, I can backseat quarterback and call it a lot of things. You know, when I opened the case, you know, I had questions right off. You know, why wasn't this done? Why wasn't that done? Why wasn't that question asked? Why wasn't this question asked? And why weren't those folks, you know, talked to the way that I would have talked to them?
St. Joe was a sleepy town, so to speak, safe and sleepy.
St. Joseph Police Lieutenant Jim Reeves was the original lead detective on the case. He is now retired.
This was my first potential homicide that I was responsible for.
Area police departments quickly formed a task force to work the case. He says they questioned at least 100 witnesses.
And so we tried to track down everything that came to us. And
the original detective acknowledged that he made mistakes, but he says it was not a cover-up. He now is questioning the AG's findings.
It's easy to blame a dead guy.
So how frustrating was it when you saw this report that basically called Curtis Pitts the killer? You read the report.
I did.
Do you see that there's any evidence there?
There is no evidence.
Also, Target 8's review of 420 pages of police reports shows that the witnesses the AG is relying on told stories that are inconsistent.
Why would they pinpoint my son other than he was the easiest target?
Why do you think he was the easiest target?
Because he passed away.
Curtis Pitts' mom also wants to see the evidence.
Something's not right.
There are disputes among witnesses about what happened the night of May 17th, how this all got started. Some say McGinnis and his girlfriend, a white girl, were at the club, a hangout for teens along the bluff in St. Joseph. Others say he never made it into the club that night.
When we come back, the curious answer the AG's main suspect gave when detectives asked him decades ago if he had anything to do with McGinnis's death. Our investigation into the May 1991 death of Eric McGinnis continues. Here's Target 8 investigator Ken Kolker with key details about a possible motive.
The AG says there is no disputing this. At about 9:30 that night, McGinnis broke into a car not far from the club and stole $44. The car's owner, 41-year-old Ted Warmbine, who was white, spotted McGinnis, tackled him, lost control of him, then gave chase, later telling police he'd lost him downtown after about a block. A witness called police, starting a search. That witness told Target 8 that Warmbine was huffing and puffing and could not catch McGinnis. Other witnesses said they heard Warmbine yell, quote, "If I catch up to you, I'll kill you." But police reports show that Warmbine had an alibi for the rest of that night and later passed polygraph tests. Police cleared him. About a month after the death, Reeves considered yet another possible suspect, Curtis Pitts, the same man recently identified as the killer after learning that Pitts had a possible motive. Pitts and McGinnis had dated the same girl. And Pitts gave a curious answer when the detective asked, "Did you have anything to do with Eric's death at all?" "No," Pitts said, "not that I know of." Pitts and his girlfriend said they were at a party that night with friends 20 minutes away in Berrien Springs. They identified 2 alibi witnesses. But those alibi witnesses who did not want to be identified told Target 8 that police back then never questioned them. Nobody ever asked her to check Curtis Pitts' alibi.
Well,
Did that surprise you?
It did.
Last year, the AG investigators knocked on their doors. He says he doubts that Pitts, a man he described as his best friend, was a killer. At the time of his suicide in 2003, Pitts was an apprentice electrician who had a short criminal record that included drunk driving and misdemeanor assault. They said he gave him a roundhouse kick and knocked him into the river.
I don't believe it.
You ever see him do a roundhouse kick?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
I mean, he was a fighter.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, he'd hold his own.
Not only that, but while police back then gave Pitts' girlfriend a polygraph test, which she passed, they never asked Pitts to take one. If they're polygraphing all these other people,
Why wouldn't they polygraph him? Which was a question that I had. I asked that same question. Why not polygraph the main suspect? Why not sitting down and put the light on him and ask him the hard questions?
Why was Curtis Pitts never offered a polygraph?
I don't know.
I mean, do you
because
think
his information was corroborated by other people.
But certainly not by those alibi witnesses.
I didn't speak to them.
Yeah. Should they have been talked to?
Absolutely.
They were alibi witnesses.
Yeah, absolutely.
And they were not talked to.
Okay.
Instead, police focused on the theory that McGinnis was on the run after stealing from that car.
A lot of people would dare to say that he was in a fight or flight mode, and he was looking for ways to get home, or at least get out of here.
To his home in Benton Harbor, across the river.
So jump into the river to try to swim across?
That was a thought, or maybe he fell in.
A now retired state police detective lieutenant who reviewed the case in 1991 agreed. He told Target 8 it was not a homicide. So did an FBI agent who reviewed the case back then for the U.S. Department of Justice for possible civil rights violations. He says he found none. In 1993, 2 years after the death of Eric McGinnis, Curtis Pitts' name came up again from a man locked up at the Berrien County Jail, a man just beginning a life of crime. He told the original detective that he saw Pitts, McGinnis, and the girlfriend in the club that night, that the three argued, and that Pitts and others later followed McGinnis out.
31 years ago, you see behind me, was a lot different, but police were told that McGinnis was chased down these stairs toward Lake Michigan and then north toward the South Pier, just behind those high-rises.
At the pier, the witness said he watched Pitts kick McGinnis in the head and knock him into the river before Pitts and others threw rocks at him. He told Reeves he had heard Pitts refer to blacks as the N-word. But the original detectives doubted his story, saying he could not describe McGinnis and could not identify the girlfriend. He also failed a polygraph.
Polygraph examiner found him to be very deceptive.
Not only that, but the witness identified a friend who was with him at the pier. That friend denied it. The AG investigator set up a recent meeting with the jailhouse witness who was back in prison.
I can see that he was upset about that. I even asked him, and he said to me, I told them what happened 30 years ago, and they wouldn't listen to me. And he also added, and I'm paraphrasing here, they let that guy get away with killing that man or that boy, something like that. They let him get away with murder. And I told him what happened. I don't want to have nothing to do with this. And he got up and walked out. That's all I was able to get out of him.
Target 8 spoke to the jailhouse witness from prison. He refused to discuss the case and said he fears for his safety. He questioned why the AG's office publicly released his name.
The cops did not believe you back in '93 when you first came forward because you failed a polygraph test. Do you recall that?
Okay, so here's my question to you. If that's the case, right?
Right.
Why now? You know what I'm saying? Why now? Why now is my name coming up, and why now does anybody care what I have to say? You know what I'm saying? If I'm not believable, if I'm a liar or whatever, then why now?
Did you actually see Curtis Pitts kick him in the head? Or did Curtis...
I can't. See, that's one of the questions that if I answer that and I say yes or whatever, then that makes me look like a snitch. That's not a question that I can answer.
And when we return, the Maine Attorney General investigators say validated that witness's story. Our investigation into the 1991 death of Eric McGinnis continues. The first witness to identify the alleged killer failed a polygraph test and changed his story. Once again, here's Ken Kolker.
But the AG investigator says it was another witness, a registered sex offender named Michael Batson, who validated the story told by that jailhouse witness.
It's different if you have a one-witness testimony, but when you have another person that confirms...
The AG investigator says Batson told his story to police years ago.
But he felt that his information was not going further.
He also told his probation officer, and she took notes, which the investigators found, including some from 2003.
The notes validates the story. And it's not one entry, it's several entries. It's a half a dozen entries over a course of a period of years.
It's not clear if the probation agent ever told police. Batson finally agreed to talk to the AG investigators in March.
When he finally talked to us, he broke down on multiple occasions, crying, very emotional, because he finally had someone to listen to him.
The AG's report shows that Batson told them that he and a friend were smoking on the beach that night when they saw 5 white men, including Pitts and Warmbine, chasing a black kid. Remember, it was Warmbine who had chased McGinnis earlier from his car up on the bluff.
Mr. Batson says in the beginning, when he's watching these 5 individuals chase Eric McGinnis is holding this coat. And he says as he's running past us on the beach, he looks at us like, "Can you help me?" And he said that he didn't help him, and because it was obvious why he was running.
Batson told him he figured the kid had stolen that coat. While he did not witness an assault, he says that Pitts that night told him, quote, "We can take care of you right now just like we took care of that effing N-word. There's the water. Go ahead and look." He told police that Pitts, Warmbine, and another man were soaking wet. After the body was found, Batson told police that Pitts visited his house and told him he had done a roundhouse kick to the side of Eric's head, that Eric hit his head on the pier and fell in the water. He said Pitts told him they went into the water hoping to fish him out. The AG's office says that the man who was smoking with Batson that night backed up the story. Batson refused Target 8's request to go on camera, but in an exchange of text messages, he said the AG's report was incomplete. For one thing, he said 2 groups were chasing McGinnis that night, the group of 5 and a separate group of 8. He called it a lynching. What's still not clear, though, is how Pitts and Warmbine, both with different motives for chasing McGinnis, joined forces that night. Warmbine died of bladder cancer in 2007. The original detective and another detective who worked the case are skeptical.
I find that to be ridiculous. Mr. Warmbine was a man in his 40s. He was reportedly slightly intoxicated at the time that this incident happened, and that he was a heavy smoker, and he was overweight, and by accounts that the report indicates, he was extremely winded by the time he chased the suspect who broke into his car.
Police reports show other inconsistencies. The jailhouse witness told police this all went down after midnight, but the new witness told police the sun had not yet set.
It was dusk. From the information that we got, yeah, Mr. Batson said that it was not dark yet, but it was getting dark.
Also, the jailhouse witness, after failing a polygraph, later changed his story to say that he never actually saw the kick, that Pitts just told him about it. The new investigation closed the case without criminal charges. The key players, the AG's office says, are dead. Do you believe this was a racially motivated homicide?
I don't think so.
Based on what you're saying, do you feel like if Curtis Pitts was alive, you would have enough evidence to charge him with a crime?
I do.
And what would that crime be?
It would have to be murder all day.
The original detective sees it another way.
I do. I don't know where the proof is. It's a nice way to say, this is what happened. Okay, people of Benton Harbor, people of St. Joe, people of Barron County, this is what happened, so let's just...
As for McGinnis's uncle, the retired state police lieutenant, he remains convinced that the attack was a racially motivated hate crime.
You can't get beyond the idea that Eric was in an all-white community. He was a young black boy having sexual activity with a white female, and she was popular. She had friends, maybe a new boyfriend, and he was chased. It's not that difficult to fill in the blanks at that point. He was chased, and he was found in the river. Speculation is that they caught him. You got to think that they did, and they killed him.
The family has asked the Department of Justice to investigate under the recently passed Emmett Till Anti-Lynching Act.
Those that are involved have not been brought to justice.